Welcome to Season 5 of the Long-Winded One podcast. Listen as we showcase original work from top Royal Road authors read by professional voice actors. Hear interviews from your favourite lit RPG and game lit authors. Lastly, listen as the Long-Winded One tries his hand at his first ever lit RPG novel, The Four Treasures.
Well, welcome everybody to another episode of Long-Winded One. With me tonight, I have somebody named SerasStreams. Actually, his real name is Alex, but I know him and I got to know him as SerasStreams. He is best known for Ruinous Return, but he's written many other things on and off Royal Road. We're going to be talking a little bit tonight about his work, Dark Matter Ascension. Welcome to the podcast, Alex.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, well, you know what's happening here the second half of the season is during my time on Royal Road, I've gotten to know a few authors fairly well. We've talked on and off Discord, on and off Royal Road, had some really nice conversations. We share a profession, right? Education.
Oh, yes.
And I've enjoyed your stuff. And so I asked you to come on the podcast and contribute 10 minutes of Dark Matter Ascension, which we'll hear after this episode. But we want to, you're really active in the community. You're really active in sort of the Royal Road Discords, which we'll talk about, I'm sure. But if you can, just tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and so far, what's influenced your writing?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I go by the pen name SerasStreams, and my real name is Alex Economy, and I've correlated the two names together. I am a high school English teacher, and I've been a teacher full-time now for 7 years. Before that, I substituted, and then before that was college and, the college years. I'm a California resident, and I currently am in the Bay Area working at Mount Diablo Unified School District. And I lived and grew up near Sacramento, which is the capital of the state. So, past influence of my writing, I gotta say, it started off as a kid and a teenager, and I was really blessed because my parents really advocated reading. They really cut down TV time. I'm in my mid-30s, so most of my childhood was from, the mid-90s to early 2000s. My parents really moderated our electronics consumption, so we got to use books, and I dove hard into fantasy. Easily 10 to 20 books a week from the library, to the point where my parents were like, okay, you only get one library trip a week, because we were going like 3 times a week when I was 7, 8, 9. So that definitely influenced my writing in the genre that I prefer, which is fantasy, high fantasy, dark fantasy, all types of fantasy. The second influence on my writing is my education. I have my bachelor's degree in English with a focus on creative writing, and that really forced me to extend myself into all different types of genres and styles and branch out my subject matter away from that comfort zone of fantasy, because I had to write Victorian style romance. I had to write science fiction. Oh yeah, that class was a pain, I'll tell you. Oh dear God, Pride and Prejudice was, trying to write a scene that I liked and was into in the style of Pride and Prejudice was a challenge, but definitely valuable towards my growth as a writer.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last thing that really influenced my writing is imagination based off of tabletop games. I've been playing Dungeons and Dragons and other tabletop games like Pathfinder, Fabula Ultima, all these different games, easily hundreds of them over the past 17 years. And I started young, started playing them when I was 10. And when I was 12 years old, I took over the reins of Game Master, and I've just told stories with friends around a table. And eventually you do that enough that you start to really understand all the core pieces that are needed for a story and what makes a compelling narrative with multiple main characters, multiple protagonists. Because when you're in that type of group environment, you have to try to make everybody feel like the main character.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say that's probably one of the most significant, if not the most significant, impact on my personal writing style. But it all started when I was reading fantasy books as a kid.
Can I ask? You a lot of good stuff here, but I'm always curious about the kinds like who are the authors that really made an impression?
Number one, Raymond E. Feist. He wrote the Rift War saga
Hmm.
and a whole bunch of you've heard of him, I'm
Yeah, I have.
sure. Yeah. So let's put this into just perspective. There was a story called Betrayal at Krondor, which was part of the Serpent War saga. I read that book over 80 times in high school. Like my copy had pages falling out because I was reading it so much. I could not get enough of the world building, the characters. I mean, it was phenomenal. So Raymond E. Feist was huge. And then also Tolkien.
Oh, you're a good man.
Yes, well, that college course that I mentioned, like in my senior year of my bachelor's program, I got to take a senior seminar, and they used to offer a Tolkien course, but they didn't anymore. So I asked why, and they said, well, the professor that taught it retired, but if you can get enough people interested and find a professor to teach it on campus, we'll put it back on. So I was able to get 168 people to sign a petition, even though there were only 35 slots in the class. And I got two professors who were willing to teach it, and one of them, shout out to Miss Kim Zarins up at Sac State University, she took on the class, and it was phenomenal. So we got to dive into Tolkien for a whole semester. And then, of course, I was raised in a fairly conservative Christian household, so what was on the shelf was constantly the Christian fantasy Chronicles of Narnia.
Oh yeah,
Yes, so that was a
that's good
mainstay in the
stuff.
household. It is, it's great, and I
Yeah.
love that Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, that they were contemporaries. And when I
Yes.
traveled to England to celebrate graduating my master's, going to the bar that they used to hang out in and like the seats that they used to sit and drink in and talk shop about, that was
When
awesome.
I think about C.S. Lewis a lot, actually, we're kind of in the same, isekai. We write in that kind of world, right?
Yeah, the other
Uh,
world.
the
Yes.
other world, yeah. And I think a lot about that book that was written after, but kind of comes before, where the wardrobe came from, right?
Is that,
Um,
I think that's The Horse and His Boy,
well,
maybe?
no, it's the magician's nephew, isn't that
Oh
right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Magician's Nephew. Yeah, that one.
yeah, so it was written after, but it chronologically takes place before, and you learn of this kind of other place where they had all these trees and pools of water, and each of the trees kind of fed a different world, and the wardrobe came from one of those trees, if I
Yeah.
remember correctly, and I
No, no, that sounds right. You're giving me a blast from the past here because I haven't read those
yeah.
books in like 20 years
Well, I
almost.
think about that a lot, right? When we're writing in the other world, I mean, it was kind of like the first Portal Fantasy in some ways.
It really seems like it, especially in the modern zeitgeist. I would say, like by raw definition, the idea of leaving our world and going to the other world. The only thing that would be before that, and I think your novel, if I remember correctly, because it's been a while since I've read yours, touches on that idea of the other world and the Fae and the Seelie.
Sure, sure. Yep. That is correct. Yes, thanks for the plug. Appreciate
Of course. It's a good book. Go read it.
it.
The last thing I'd say, and this kind of ties into where I think we're going next, writing RPGs is something that I kind of naturally dove into, and that's obviously framed my writing since we write in the lit RPG genre. But running tabletop games for so many years, eventually it got to the point where I wanted to include things that didn't exist in the game. So I had to start inventing it. I started homebrewing a whole bunch of stuff. And then eventually I kept homebrewing until I got to the point where I could basically write an entire role playing game on my own.
Hmm.
So that definitely affected my current love of working on systems. And you mentioned how I'm active in some of these author Discord servers. One of my favorite things to do with other authors is just talk shop about systems
Yeah.
and try to figure out all the little different niches and the different functions behind them. It's one of my favorite non-writing pastimes.
Hmm. Well, can I share something with you?
Oh, of course.
You mentioned home brewing, and I gotta share this because I saw this the other day, and I want as many people to know about it as possible. If I could suggest a home brew that I'm gonna use this. It's called the downed condition for D&D. So instead of just basically losing your turn when you fall unconscious, there's something that somebody on, I'm not sure where it was, Instagram maybe, came up with this downed condition where you think of you're mortally wounded and you're crawling away and you're bleeding
Yeah, I
out.
think I found it.
Yeah, and so you can basically take one of those failed saving throws and do like one
One
action,
action. Yeah.
right? And like stick your sword into the bad guy at but you sacrifice,
Yeah,
you're
one of
like,
those saves.
yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
I love that rule. I'm next time I play D&D 5th edition, I'm gonna have to bring that in.
All right. All right. Well, I could talk about this kind of stuff all day, but I'm going to get to the next question here, which is how did you come to the world of lit RPG and game lit? And did you have a gateway writer to the in or out of the community?
I will say that my kind of intro to the idea of lit RPG and game lit came in a very roundabout way. So I've been writing for years and years and years, and I've been writing mostly books that I've been trying to get in front of agents, had some agents express interest, but ultimately decide not to take them, etc. And eventually, when we hit kind of mid pandemic, about 2021, I think, as we were getting towards the middle and then the tail end of it, I started really getting into light novels online and really adoring that style. And eventually, that light novel pipeline led me to lit RPGs and sort of like lit RPG light, where it's like, okay, there's progression fantasy, there's obviously a system, but I
Hmm.
don't know what the system is because we're not getting the view. And the gateway for that to me was a light novel called Arfareta from Weakest to World's Strongest, or something like that. It was an
Okay.
anime. They turned it into an anime, but the light novel's better. And
Mhm.
I could see that there was a system there. Like my RPG mind was thinking, there's a system there. What is the system? And I started trying to figure it out on my end and homebrew whatever secret system the author was using and keeping
Oh,
hidden from us. And then eventually I was like, well, there's got to be stories out there that have systems built in. So this past year, 2024, in January, I discovered Royal Road through Reddit. I was browsing Reddit, browsing progression fantasy as a subreddit, browsing that manga slash light novels Reddit, and someone mentioned Royal Road. I got onto it, and I'm like, oh my god,
down the
like
rabbit hole.
yeah, exactly. That rabbit hole was there, and I dove in hard. And kind of the gateway writer into the community, because I've always loved isekai anime. It's one of my favorites, and isekai anime has a lot of crossover with lit RPG nowadays.
Hmm.
But um, the isekai writer that I discovered at first is the wonderful Neon Dreams, who writes Second Summons, along with he wrote Riftwalker, which I believe unfortunately was a dropped project. But he kind of became my mentor when I published my first story on Royal Road. Got about 330 followers, so not bad for a first outing. Um, but he was like, hey, this story has really good potential, but it's not quite written right for Royal Road.
Yeah.
Gave me a whole bunch of advice on how to rewrite it. I spent about 3 weeks furiously rewriting 200,000 words, not
Oh,
all of it, but big chunks,
yeah.
and then re-released it. And that was my first novel that I fully completed on Royal Road. And that was kind of my gateway. So now I have stories I follow and read every day. I check out Rising Stars probably once a week, and I write every day. Like
Hmm.
I barely touch video games. I'm down to one night of tabletop RPG a week because
Yep.
Royal Road and writing have consumed me.
Yeah. I mean, there's no room in your life once you become a writer,
I
really.
know, but it's so fun as well. It's like a nice sense of being overwhelmed by so much out there, and there is a ton of content out there on Royal Road.
There's something for everybody, really, truly. How has your experience been on Royal Road so far?
So for me, it's been pretty damn fantastic because to kind of go into that a little bit, I have to go a little more into my background. Not a ton, just a little bit. So I've been writing creatively for 18 years. I'm 31 years old. I started writing when I was in middle school. Obviously, it was horrible. Same thing with high school. It was horrible. I learned it was horrible when I went to college, and they're like, "Go find some of your old writing." And I was looking through, and I went, "Ooh, this is bad." Right? I'm sure you probably looked through your old writing and seen something you cringed at.
Oh, not only do I cringe at it, but there's a reason I didn't continue it.
Yeah, exactly. So, I've been writing for 18 years, and when I finished with my bachelor's degree and I finished with my master's degree, I started writing a series of novels that I still have in my back pocket, and they are really highly polished. They're professional quality, but they're not appropriate to the ebook market. They're very much traditional fantasy.
Mhm.
So I've been writing for a long time. Even my first outing, my first take at Echoes Evolution back in February, the prose was good enough quality to get up to 330 followers. And then after the rework and the relaunch in March, it got up to a max of 990 followers. So
Wow.
I think my first outing was definitely not the norm. And I can also credit that to not only Neon Dreams as a mentor, but he introduced me to so many other people in the community. I got to talk to Zogarth. I got to talk to Shirtaloon. I got to talk to Raven's Dagger. I mean, that was really my gateway into what I would say is probably a smooth and seamless experience on Royal Road from the writer aspect.
Well, it seems like good things come to the people who do the work, right? Like this wasn't a happenstance, right? I mean, some of it's luck, I guess, but you put in the time, you reached out to people, you allowed yourself to be mentored. Like I bet a lot of people wish they could have that experience.
Well, nice natural dovetail. Yeah, so a lot of people do want that mentoring experience, and I actually offer that to people. I've been running a mentor program for a couple of months now where I have just free advice that I give to people. I answer questions, I help them get ready for a launch on Royal Road, and I help them work towards a successful Rising Stars run to really kick themselves off. And I mean, just to go through a couple of past pupils here, Spectre Soul, who wrote, sorry, I'll give you the story here. Spectre Soul, who wrote Turtle Toby, the Healing Dark Lord, that got up to Rising Stars 26. Sieg Hero with Urban Knight got up to Rising Stars 32, I think. 6Bs with Cyberpunk, his Cyberpunk story called Cybergene Blood and Steel, still ongoing, but it peaked at Rising Star 11 and is now starting to fall. And most recently, Mad Chad with Lord of Hunger. Right now, he's number 3 on Rising Stars All.
Now, can I stop you 1 second, because I know what you're talking about. But in case there's somebody out there who doesn't know how important Rising Stars is, could you please explain that?
Yeah, so any author that goes from Royal Road to publication generally hits Rising Stars All at some point. To give perspective, on Royal Road, there are tens of thousands of stories, if not 100,000 or more, with under double digits in follower count. Everybody who gets onto Rising Stars All ends up with at least 300 followers, but normally way more. So getting onto Rising Stars All is kind of the gateway to getting a large follower count, which then in turn can lead to income via Patreon if you offer advanced content. And if you do well enough, some publishers will even reach out to you. Like my friend Little Lynx, who exploded onto the scene with Wraithwood Botanist a couple months ago, was contacted by a publisher when they hit around 6,000 followers, and they got a contract, and they hadn't published before. So Rising Stars is kind of the gateway to hitting early success with a fiction. It's not the only way, though. There are plenty of authors who do smaller runs, lower follower count stories, but they eventually get in contact with a publisher who sits down to read their stuff, and then they get published. But that Rising Stars run, that's where you really get the huge follower growth, like hundreds of followers a day.
I ask this question to everybody that is written on Royal Road, and I'm curious what your, I don't know, vantage point is. I've noticed that a lot of the well-known lit RPG authors from Royal Road tend to make their way to Patreon, or before getting a publishing deal, if they even do a publishing deal. What has your trajectory been through all of this?
So, I'm gonna approach it from the same angle that I would one of my pupils in the mentor program. So, the best way to put it is there's a pipeline that you're trying to build as an ebook author through Royal Road with the web serial format. The pipeline is write a story, build up a backlog, meaning you have a bunch of content available that you keep in reserve. You push your backlog onto Patreon, and the hope is that people enjoy your fiction enough on Royal Road, on Scribble Hub, whatever site you end up posting on, that they're like, ooh, I want to keep reading this story. And then they come over to Patreon, where they pay a certain amount a month, and they get to have that backlog of chapters. For my personal experience, I had very little success at the start because I didn't really know what I was doing. After talking to my mentor and getting Echoes Evolution up and running, my kind of flagship at the start of this year when I got into this whole business, I peaked at around $130 a month of income. And then when the story concluded in May, it dropped down to like 60. I had a couple of fans who were still supporting me because they knew my next project was coming out. Then after a while, I got Ruinous Return up and running, and I just provided a way bigger backlog, and that increased the amount of patrons that I received. So for anyone who is interested in getting into Royal Road and then figuring out that pipeline, build a big backlog, offer it on Patreon for a set amount, and just keep consistent with your posts. That is just one stream of income. The kind of pipeline ideally is you go onto Royal Road, in my case, with book 1 finished. And book 1 is available to patrons, and then you keep writing book 2, book 3, book 4, and pushing that out at a regular pace to patrons. Mm-hmm. At the same time, you are continually releasing on Royal Road and advertising, hey, my Patreon has this much advanced content. And then you just consistently do that. And eventually, when your book is finished, then you submit it to publishers. And then publishing is where kind of the big money is. So for authors, ideally, from my perspective, again, I'm not a full-time author. I'm just speaking about this because I have enough insight from talking with full-time authors. Patreon is a start to the revenue stream to enable people to go to full-time writing. The big money comes from getting it in front of a publisher or self-publishing. MelasDelta, great author, I believe did the Salvos series, along with others. Kara the Last Dragon Soul was one of their recent ones I really enjoyed. MelasDelta has put out a ton of guides you can find on Reddit for how to self-publish on Amazon. Great content. So even if you're an author writing on Royal Road and you only have like 100, 200 followers, you really don't think a publisher is going to take you seriously, you can publish it yourself. And you can make some decent money off it. To just throw some numbers out there, Echoes Evolution was self-published, and when I was advertising it, because you have to pay to advertise to get more viewers, when I was advertising it, I made $1,500 in that month. And I was a no-name author with nothing else out there.
Well, I have found talking with you tonight and sort of offline. Actually, it's online, but it's
right. Not being recorded.
Nothing is offline anymore. Anyway, I want to know, and we've talked about some of the things that I think you're going to say, but I know you have other nuggets of wisdom. And if you could give an aspiring writer some advice, what would that be?
So the biggest piece of aspiring writer advice I would give is write what you love, write what you know. There's a bunch of different people that have all different viewpoints on this, but I wrote Ruinous Return, which is my current flagship novel that's out there. I wrote it because I loved the story that my mentor Neon Dreams wrote. I loved Second Summons, but I felt like he didn't go as deep into the psychological aspect of character trauma as I could, based on my own ability to do research, the people that I've spoken with, the reality of my life, the traumas that I've experienced. So I wanted to write something that I loved, but also something that I knew. So that's my biggest piece of advice to a new writer is find your love of writing by writing what you enjoy to read, and make sure that your characters, the environments they find themselves in, that it's something that you know, whether that's the characterization, their background traumas, their significant others, the relationships they have, because the better you know it, the more believable it's going to be. And then later on, you can look at starting to adapt what you love and what you know towards the more on market novels.
Well, tell us where we can find you online. Please tell us about that mentor program, and tell us what we can expect from you here in the near future.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm available on Royal Road, and I also have a Linktree that people can use to find my Patreon, my Royal Road, the mentor program document. So I'm sure you can probably link that somewhere underneath this. But the Royal Road is the best place to find me. My Linktree has my Discord server in it, which shout out to Mango Media for putting that together for me, because I don't know how to manage a Discord server. I just use the tech. I don't understand it very well. So huge shout out to them for taking that and running with it for me. So yeah, I'm on Royal Road, Linktree, Reddit, and Discord. I try to stay off most socials because it's just not good for my mental health.
Oh
I've
gosh.
tried it before, and like Twitter made me have active depression, and I'm like, yeah, no, okay, this isn't healthy. Echo's Evolution is available on Amazon. Versewalker is a highly visual lit RPG, and you can find it for free in its entirety on Royal Road. Ruinous Return is on Royal Road. It's almost done. It'll be finished by December 10th for book 2. And my patrons have already finished book 2. And they're also kind of brainstorming ideas with me for book 3, because there's a lot of different directions I could take it. But I want to make sure that I'm writing a story that not only I enjoy, but is a satisfactory conclusion to the fans. So if you end up reading Ruinous Return and liking it, hop on over to Patreon and you can join the conversation. But I think the next most important thing to talk about is the excerpt people are going to be listening to in a moment,
Yes.
right? So Dark Matter Ascension, because that's my big flagship coming up. It's really to market, but it's a story that I have loved writing. My patrons are already at chapter 62 of book 1, so by the time we release it on Royal Road on December 2nd, it will be probably halfway into book 2 for patrons. So again, trying to drive people from Royal Road over to Patreon. Dark Matter Ascension has also already been picked up by Mango Media for publication. Book 1 is currently at the editors, because I'm about 70,000 words into book 2 as the time of recording. And the story is a lit RPG about a guy named Jace Saren, and the world goes through something called cosmogenic merging. And he has to decide whether he wants to be an aspirant, which has a very low chance of survival but can lead to phenomenal cosmic power, or a civilian. And it's a blend of fantasy, science fiction, and magitech, so kind of meeting in the middle.
Science fantasy.
It is soft science. I'm not like super hard sci-fi, because when you're dealing with black holes and dark matter and pulsars, it's like, yeah, there's a lot of science out there, but it's more fun to play loosey-goosey with it.
Mm-hmm.
So so he goes through his aspirant trial and he completes it, and then he gets to choose a cosmic power, and that's where the title of the story comes in. He does something during his trial. I don't want to spoil it because it happens in chapter 5, but he does something during his trial that gets the attention of someone special. And they say, let's give you access to a special cosmic power that's normally restricted, dark matter. So the plot is he's going to travel to different worlds, take on different types of challenges, and come up against other factions, such as the Star Council, the Black Hole Conclave, Nebula Alliance. And it is a lit RPG that has skills, classes, skill evolutions, equipment augmentations, but it's not really crunchy. Some of those lit RPGs out there, they got a whole bunch of numbers involved in them, and this gets rid of a lot of the numbers for a more narrative lit RPG. The system is ever present, and Chapter 1 is going to be introducing the listeners to Jace in his job as a courier, and the immediate events of cosmogenic merging occurring. And if you really like the story, if you're like, ooh, I love this, I want to read more of it, it's on Patreon. As of time of recording, it's up to chapter 63. Sorry, chapter 63 dropped today. And it won't hit Royal Road until December 2nd. So if you really want to start reading it, it's there for you.
Thank you, Alex, for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure. And hopefully in the future, we could maybe do a revisit of some type. But I am so pleased to have been here, and I cannot wait to see what you end up coming up with next.
Thank you for joining us down this lit RPG deep dive. Please consider giving us a review on Apple Podcasts and visit us over at longwinded.one, where you can see past episodes and find all of our socials, even our new Discord server. We hope you enjoy.